She thought she was protecting a stranger who had no power, until she discovered the man she just slapped was the most feared Korean mafia boss in the city. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe everyone deserves respect, no matter their position, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Maya Carter. The Golden Soul restaurant was a place where people came to be impressed. The lights were always warm. The tables were always perfect. The guests were always important. Behind those elegant doors, business deals were made, fortunes were discussed, and powerful people expected everything to happen their way. But there was one person everyone knew never to upset. Ethan Park, the Korean Mafia boss. His name alone was enough to change the atmosphere of any room. A man with influence. A man with resources. A man whose calm expression was often more intimidating than anger. That evening, the restaurant was filled with wealthy guests and quiet conversations. Until one customer decided the entire room belonged to him. Richard Collins was a successful businessman. He wore an expensive watch, a designer suit, and the confidence of someone who believed money could excuse anything. A young employee accidentally brought the wrong order to his table. A simple mistake, one that could have been corrected with a few polite words. But Richard did not want a solution. He wanted someone to blame. Do you people even know what you're doing? His voice echoed across the restaurant. The young employee immediately apologized. I'm sorry, sir. I'll fix it right away. But Richard continued. You should be grateful I'm even spending money here. Several guests looked away. The employee stayed quiet. Everyone understood the situation. They had seen people like him before. People who used their position to make others feel small. Then Maya Carter stepped forward. She was a black waitress who had worked at the Golden Soul restaurant for 3 years. To many customers, Maya was invisible. She brought food. She answered questions. She cleaned tables. But Maya had never believed that someone's job determined their value. She had learned something important from life. Silence did not always mean peace. Sometimes silence only protected the wrong person. Sir, Maya said calmly. There was a mistake, but he already apologized. The restaurant became quieter. Richard slowly turned toward her. Did I ask for your opinion? Maya remained still. No, a pause. But someone should say something. The word surprised everyone. Because nobody expected a waitress to challenge a wealthy customer. Richard laughed. You work here. His eyes moved over her uniform. Do you understand your position? Maya looked at the employee standing behind her. Then back at Richard. Yes. Her voice remained calm. And I also understand when someone is being treated unfairly. The atmosphere changed. Everyone felt it. Because Maya was not trying to win an argument. She was standing for someone who could not stand for himself. Richard stepped closer. You should be careful. The warning was clear. But Maya did not move. Being rich does not give you the right to disrespect people. For a moment, the entire restaurant froze. Then Richard smiled. A cold, arrogant smile. You have no idea who you're talking to. Maya looked at him. And maybe she should have walked away. Maybe she should have ignored it. Maybe she should have protected herself. But she looked at the young employee who was still embarrassed. And she remembered every time she had seen someone powerless stay silent. So she made a choice. A choice nobody expected. Her hand moved. A single slap. The sound traveled across the restaurant. Everything stopped. The conversations. The music. The movement. Every person turned toward Maya. Nobody could believe what they had just witnessed. A waitress had slapped a powerful customer. Maya stood there, breathing slowly. She knew what she had done. But she also knew why she did it. Then the manager's expression changed. His face became pale. Because he recognized the man standing in front of her. That's, his voice trembled. Maya, do you know who you just slapped? She looked confused. Then everyone heard the name that made the entire restaurant go silent. Ethan Park, the Korean Mafia boss. The man nobody dared to challenge. And Maya Carter finally realized. The customer she had just slapped was not an ordinary man. He was the most dangerous person in the room. Everyone expected Maya Carter to regret the moment she discovered Ethan Park's true identity. But nobody expected the Korean Mafia boss to see her courage as something worth respecting. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe standing up for what is right takes real courage, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Maya Carter. The Golden Soul restaurant was still silent after the revelation. Everyone knew the name Ethan Park, the Korean Mafia boss. The man whose reputation reached far beyond the city. A man who could change people's lives with a single decision. And now, a waitress had slapped him. The employees waited for the reaction. Some expected anger. Some expected revenge. Others believed Maya's life would never be the same. But Ethan did something nobody predicted. He remained calm. He looked at Maya. Not with rage. Not with hatred. With curiosity. Because something about her made no sense. She did not know who he was. She did not know the power behind his name. She did not know how dangerous the situation could become. And still, she acted. The restaurant manager quickly stepped forward. "Mr. Park, we sincerely apologize." Ethan looked at him. "Why?" The manager hesitated. "Because of what happened." Ethan glanced toward Maya. Then toward the employees she had protected. Did she hurt someone without reason? Nobody answered. Because everyone knew the truth. Maya's action was shocking. But the reason behind it was different. She was not trying to embarrass him. She was trying to stop someone from being humiliated. Ethan looked back at Maya. "Do you know who I am now?" Maya nodded slowly. "Yes." And she stayed quiet for a moment, then answered honestly. "And that does not change what happened." The entire restaurant froze. Because even after learning his identity, she still stood by her decision. Ethan studied her. Most people changed the moment they learned his name. Their confidence disappeared. Their voices became softer. Their opinions suddenly became different. But Maya remained the same. That interested him. Later that evening, Ethan sat inside his private office. The city lights reflected across the glass windows. His security team waited outside. But his thoughts were somewhere else. The slap. The words. The look in Maya's eyes. He had spent his entire life surrounded by people who feared him. People who agreed with him. People who avoided telling him the truth. But Maya did something nobody else had done. She challenged him. Not because she hated him. Because she believed he was wrong. The next day, Ethan returned to the Golden Soul restaurant. Maya saw him approaching. She expected a conversation. Maybe an accusation. But not this. "Why did you do it?" Ethan's voice was calm. Maya looked at him. "Because someone needed to." That's simple. Yes. A pause. Sometimes people stay silent because they are afraid. Ethan looked at her. "And you weren't." Maya smiled slightly. "I was." The answer surprised him. "You were afraid?" "Of course." She looked at him. "But being afraid does not mean you should ignore what is wrong." Those words stayed with Ethan. Because he had always believed courage meant having no fear. Maya showed him something different. Courage was choosing what was right despite fear. For the first time in years, Ethan Park met someone who did not see him as a title. Not a mafia boss. Not a powerful man. Just a person. And that was something he could not forget. That night, Ethan made a decision. He would not punish Maya. He would not destroy her life. Instead, he wanted to understand her. Because the woman who had challenged him in front of an entire restaurant was the first person in years who made him question the difference between fear and respect. Everyone thought Ethan Park was searching for a reason to punish the waitress who embarrassed him. But he was actually searching for the reason she was the first person to make him question himself. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe honesty can change even the strongest people, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Ethan Park and Maya Carter. After the night at the Golden Soul restaurant, something unusual happened. Ethan Park did not move on. The incident should have been simple. A waitress crossed a line. A powerful man was challenged. A problem needed to be handled. But Ethan could not see it that way anymore. Because the more he thought about Maya Carter, the more he realized she was not the problem. She was the question. For years, Ethan lived in a world where every action had a purpose. People smiled because they wanted something. People agreed because they were afraid. People stayed close because they needed protection. But Maya was different. She had no idea who he was. She had no reason to impress him. She had no reason to risk herself. And that was exactly why Ethan could not ignore her. The next evening, Ethan returned to the Golden Soul restaurant. The moment he walked through the doors, the atmosphere changed. Employees became quiet. Customers lowered their voices. Everyone expected something to happen. They expected Ethan Park to remind everyone why people feared him. But he did not. He simply walked toward Maya. She looked at him calmly. "You came back." Ethan nodded. "I have a question." Maya waited. "Why did you do it?" She knew exactly what he meant. The slap. The moment that changed everything. Because someone needed to stop him. Ethan studied her. "You knew there could be consequences." "Yes." And you still did it? Yes. Her answer was immediate. That surprised him. Most people needed time to think before answering him. Maya did not. Why? She looked at him. Because being afraid does not make something right. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than Ethan expected. Because Ethan had spent his entire life surrounded by fear. He built his reputation on it. He used it. He depended on it. But Maya showed him something he had never considered. Fear could control people, but it could never create genuine respect. Later that week, Ethan began learning more about Maya. He expected to find someone reckless, someone looking for attention. Instead, he discovered someone completely different. Maya worked hard. She helped new employees. She treated everyone with the same respect, regardless of their position. She was not brave because she believed nothing bad could happen. She was brave because she believed some things were worth standing for. That realization stayed with Ethan. One night, he sat alone in his office. The city lights reflected against the glass. His security team stood outside. His phone continued receiving messages. But Ethan was silent. He looked at his own reflection. A man everyone feared. A man everyone obeyed. A man who had spent years believing that was enough. Then he remembered Maya's words. Being rich does not give you the right to disrespect people. Nobody had ever spoken to him like that. Not because they could not. Because they were afraid. And that difference bothered him. The next day, Ethan saw Maya again. You still think you were right? He asked. Maya looked at him. Yes. A small pause. But I also think people can change. Ethan looked surprised. Even people like me? Maya did not hesitate. Especially people who think they can't. For the first time in years, Ethan Park had no answer. Because the woman who had challenged him was not trying to defeat him. She was reminding him that he was still capable of becoming someone better. And that was more powerful than any threat he had ever faced. Everyone thought Ethan Park was trying to understand the waitress who challenged him. But he was actually discovering how much of himself he had lost while chasing power. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe people can change when they finally face the truth, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Ethan Park and Maya Carter. For the first time in years, Ethan Park started looking at his own life differently. Not because someone defeated him, not because someone threatened his position, but because someone without power made him question everything he believed. Maya Carter was not afraid of him. That was what bothered him the most. Everyone else saw Ethan Park and immediately saw the reputation, the money, the influence, the danger. But Maya saw something else. A person. And Ethan was not used to that. Growing up, Ethan learned one lesson above all others. Never show weakness. The world respected strength. The world followed those who could control it. So he built himself into someone nobody could challenge. A man who always had the final answer. A man who never apologized. A man who never allowed emotions to affect his decisions. But Maya did not see that as strength. She saw someone who had forgotten what strength was supposed to mean. One evening, Ethan returned to the Golden Soul restaurant. This time, he did not arrive with security surrounding him. He did not demand attention. He simply walked in. The employees noticed immediately. The same man who once made everyone nervous was now thanking people by name. The same man who expected silence was now listening. Maya watched from across the room. You're changing. Ethan looked at her. Is that a bad thing? She shook her head. No, a pause. But I think you're finally noticing things you ignored before. The word stayed with him. Because she was right. For years, Ethan focused only on threats. Who could betray him? Who could challenge him? Who could take something from him? But he never asked a simpler question. Who did he hurt along the way? That night, Ethan sat with Maya after her shift. For once, there was no power between them. No mafia boss. No waitress. Just two people having an honest conversation. Do you regret it? Ethan asked. Maya knew what he meant. The slap. No. Her answer was immediate. Even knowing who I am. Yes. Ethan looked surprised. Why? Because your identity does not change what happened. Those words were difficult for him to hear. Not because they were cruel. Because they were true. Maya continued. People can have power and still be wrong. Ethan stayed silent. Because everyone around him spent years telling him the opposite. They told him, you are right because you are powerful. You are respected because people fear you. You cannot afford to look weak. But Maya showed him something different. A person who admits mistakes is not weak. A person who refuses to change is. Later that week, Ethan visited a place he had avoided for years. his father's old office. Inside, he found old photographs, old memories, a version of himself he barely recognized. His father once told him, "Strength is not measured by how many people fear you. It is measured by how many people feel safe because of you." Ethan stared at those words for a long time. Because he finally understood. He had spent years building a powerful name, but he had forgotten what that name was supposed to represent. And the person who reminded him was the same Black Waitress who once stood in front of him with nothing but courage. But while Ethan was changing, the people around him were beginning to fear the new man he was becoming. Because a man who no longer acted through fear was much harder to control. Everyone thought Ethan Park had built an empire too powerful to change, but he was about to discover that the hardest battle was not against his enemies, but against the person he had become. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe true strength comes from humility, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Ethan Park and Maya Carter. After visiting his father's old office, Ethan Park could no longer ignore the truth. For years, he believed he became powerful because he stopped caring. He believed emotions made people vulnerable. He believed kindness created weaknesses. But now, standing among his father's old memories, he began to see things differently. His father was respected, not because people feared him, because people trusted him. That difference changed everything. The next day, Ethan returned to the Golden Soul restaurant. But this time, something was different. He did not enter like a man who owned the room. He entered like someone who wanted to understand it. The employees noticed immediately. The same people who once became nervous around him now saw something unexpected. Respect. Not forced. Not demanded. Earned. Maya watched quietly as Ethan thanked the staff. "You're surprising everyone." Ethan looked at her. "I'm surprising myself." For a moment, neither of them spoke, because both understood how much those words meant coming from him. Ethan Park was a man who rarely admitted uncertainty. But Maya had changed something. She made him realize that admitting mistakes was not losing power. It was gaining control over himself. Later that evening, Ethan and Maya talked after the restaurant closed. The lights were dim. The noise of the city filled the background. For once, there was no difference between them. No mafia boss. No waitress. Just two people. "I spent years making sure nobody could hurt me," Ethan said. Maya listened. "But I think I forgot something." "What?" "That if you never let anyone close, you also never let anyone truly know you." Maya looked at him. "That sounds lonely." Ethan smiled slightly. It was. The honesty surprised her. Because behind the reputation, behind the tattoos, behind the power, there was a man who had spent years protecting himself from the world. Maya did not feel sorry for him. She simply understood him. And that was something Ethan valued more than sympathy. But while Ethan was changing, the people around him were becoming more concerned. Inside his organization, conversations grew louder. They believed Ethan was losing focus. They believed Maya was influencing his decisions. They believed a man like Ethan Park should never allow someone without power to affect him. One evening, a meeting was held. The room was filled with people who had followed Ethan for years. One man finally spoke. "This is because of her." Ethan looked up. "Maya." The man nodded. "She changed you." Silence filled the room. Because everyone expected Ethan to deny it. But he did not. "Yes." Everyone looked surprised. "She did." A pause. "But not the way you think." Ethan stood slowly. "She did not make me weaker." His eyes moved across the room. "She reminded me what strength was supposed to be." Nobody spoke. Because they had never heard Ethan talk this way. The old Ethan protected his empire. The new Ethan protected his principles. And that difference frightened people. Because a man who only cared about power could be controlled. But a man who cared about doing what was right was impossible to manipulate. That night, Ethan looked at the city from his office window. For years, he built a world where nobody could challenge him. Now one woman with no power had done exactly that. And somehow, he was grateful. But Ethan did not know yet that the biggest challenge was coming. Because some people were not afraid of the old Ethan disappearing. They were afraid of the new Ethan becoming unstoppable. Everyone thought Ethan Park's transformation was a weakness, but they were about to discover that the man who found his humanity was more dangerous than the man who had none. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe true strength comes from doing what is right, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Ethan Park and Maya Carter. The world around Ethan Park was changing, and not everyone was happy about it. For years, Ethan built his reputation through control. People followed his orders. People respected his decisions. People feared disappointing him. That was the foundation of his power. But now, something was different. Ethan still commanded respect. He was still the Korean Mafia boss. He was still the man who could influence an entire organization with a single decision. But he was no longer the same man. He thought before acting. He listened before judging. He cared about consequences. And the people closest to him noticed. Inside his organization, conversations began. Quiet conversations. Dangerous conversations. He's changing. He's becoming distracted. He's letting one person affect him. Everyone knew who they meant. Maya Carter. The black waitress who had challenged Ethan without knowing his identity. The woman who had no power. No influence. No protection. Yet somehow, she had changed the way Ethan saw the world. One evening, Ethan entered a private meeting with his closest associates. The room was filled with people who had followed him for years. They expected the same leader they always knew. Cold, decisive, unforgiving. But they saw something different. Ethan looked around the room. You think I changed because I became weaker? Nobody answered. Because everyone knew it was true. Ethan continued. But you misunderstand. A pause. I did not lose control. He looked at them. I finally gained it. The room became silent. Because those words came from a man who once believed control meant making everyone else obey. Now he understood something else. True control was mastering himself. Later that night, Ethan visited the Golden Soul restaurant. Maya noticed his expression immediately. Something happened. Ethan looked at her. They think you changed me. Maya stayed quiet. Did I? The question surprised him. Because once again, she was not asking about power. She was asking about truth. Ethan thought for a moment. No, a pause. You reminded me I could change. Maya looked at him. That's different. Yes. Ethan nodded. It is. For a moment, they stood in silence. Because both understood what those words meant. Maya never controlled Ethan. She never demanded anything from him. She simply showed him a different way to see himself. And that was why she mattered. But outside the restaurant, someone was watching. Someone who believed Ethan had made a mistake. They believed the old Ethan Park was the only version that could survive. The ruthless one. The emotionless one. The man who never cared about losing anyone. They did not understand what Maya had given him. They thought compassion had made him weaker. They were wrong. Because before Maya entered his life, Ethan fought only to protect his power. Now he had something much stronger. A reason. A purpose. Something worth protecting. The next morning, Ethan made a decision that surprised everyone. He would no longer allow people around him to abuse power. He would no longer ignore injustice because it was convenient. He would no longer become the person the world expected him to be. And that decision changed everything. Because the people who feared Ethan's old ways were now facing something they never prepared for. A man with power. And a conscience. A man who was no longer controlled by fear. And that made Ethan Park more unpredictable than ever. Everyone thought Ethan Park's new kindness was the end of his power. But they were about to learn that a man with purpose was far more dangerous than a man driven by fear. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe true strength comes from protecting others, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Ethan Park and Maya Carter. The rumors spread quickly. People were talking about Ethan Park, not because he lost control, because he gained something nobody expected. Compassion. Inside the world Ethan built, compassion was often seen as weakness. People believed leaders survived by being feared. They believed hesitation created opportunities for enemies. They believed kindness was something powerful people could not afford. But Ethan was proving them wrong, and that frightened them. One evening, Ethan entered a meeting with his closest associates. The atmosphere was different. Usually, everyone in the room waited for Ethan's orders. Nobody questioned him. Nobody challenged his decisions. But tonight, there was tension. One of the men finally spoke. Your priorities are changing. Ethan looked at him. Yes. The honesty surprised everyone. You're not denying it. Ethan shook his head. No, a pause. Because change is not always a problem. The man looked toward the others. You used to make decisions without emotion. Ethan remained calm. I used to make decisions without understanding. Silence filled the room. Because nobody expected that answer. The old Ethan Park believed emotions made people vulnerable. The new Ethan understood that ignoring emotions made people careless. Later that night, Ethan returned to the Golden Soul restaurant. Maya was preparing to leave when she saw him. "You had another difficult day." Ethan looked at her. "How do you know?" "Because you look like someone who is fighting a battle nobody else can see." For a moment, Ethan said nothing. Because she was right. His biggest challenge was not an enemy outside his organization. It was changing the beliefs he had carried his entire life. "I spent years thinking strength meant never needing anyone." Maya listened. "But now," Ethan looked at her, "now I think strength might mean knowing what is worth protecting." Maya smiled slightly. "That sounds like progress." Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Because progress was still unfamiliar to him. But it felt different. It felt real. Meanwhile, the people who opposed Ethan's change were making their own plans. They did not hate Maya because she had power. They hated her because she had influence without demanding it. She did not control Ethan. She did not manipulate him. She simply reminded him of something he forgot, that people mattered. And that was dangerous to those who benefited from the old Ethan. They wanted the man who never questioned, the man who never cared, the man who solved everything through fear. They believed if Maya disappeared from his life, Ethan would return to who he was before. But they misunderstood something important. Maya did not create a new Ethan Park. She revealed the person who was hidden underneath. The man who still had a conscience. The man who still knew right from wrong. The man who could choose. One night, Ethan stood outside the Golden Soul restaurant. He watched Maya help a customer who needed extra patience. The same woman who once stood before him with nothing but courage. The same woman who had no idea how much that moment changed him. For years, Ethan believed power meant making sure nobody could challenge him. Now he understood something different. The strongest person was not always the one who could force others to obey. Sometimes it was the person brave enough to admit they were wrong. But as Ethan began embracing this new path, the people who feared change were preparing their response. Because they were not trying to defeat the mafia boss. They were trying to bring back the man he used to be. Everyone thought Ethan Park had finally found peace. But they were about to discover that protecting what he cared about would force him to face the most dangerous enemies of all. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe true strength comes from protecting what matters, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Ethan Park and Maya Carter. The moment Ethan chose a different path, everything around him changed. For years, people understood Ethan Park. They knew what he represented. Power, control, fear. But now, they were seeing something they never expected. A man with principles. And that made some people uncomfortable. Inside Ethan's organization, the old rules were beginning to disappear. People who once benefited from his decisions started questioning him. They missed the old Ethan. The one who never hesitated. The one who never showed compassion. The one who believed fear was the only language powerful people understood. But Ethan was no longer that person. One evening, Ethan received information that someone had been watching Maya. The moment he heard her name, his expression changed. Not with anger, with concern. The people around him noticed. Because the old Ethan would have reacted differently. He would have searched for someone to blame. He would have answered with force. But this Ethan stopped and thought. Maya's voice came back to him. Doing the right thing should not depend on who is watching. Those words changed the way he approached every decision. The next day, Ethan met with his closest associates. The room was tense. Everyone knew something was different. "You are allowing someone to influence your choices," one man said. Ethan looked at him. "No, a pause. I am finally making my own choices." The answer surprised everyone. Because for years, they believed Ethan was powerful because he never listened. But Ethan understood something now. A person who refuses to listen is not strong. They are trapped. Later that evening, Ethan visited Maya. She noticed the seriousness in his expression. "What happened?" Ethan looked at her. "They think you are my weakness." Maya remained calm. "And are they right?" Ethan thought about it. "No, a pause. You are the reason I stopped pretending I had nothing to lose." The word surprised even him. Because Ethan Park was not someone who admitted vulnerability. But Maya understood. Having something important did not make him weaker. It gave him purpose. "You cannot protect people by becoming the person who hurts everyone else," Maya said. Ethan looked at her. Because once again, she was right. For years, he believed protection meant removing emotion, creating distance, building walls. But Maya showed him another way. Standing beside someone. trusting someone, choosing what was right. Meanwhile, the people who wanted the old Ethan back were preparing their next move. They believed Maya was the reason Ethan changed. They believed removing her would bring back the man they knew. But they misunderstood something. Maya did not take away Ethan's strength. She gave him direction. And a man with power and purpose was far more difficult to control than a man driven by fear. That night, Ethan stood outside the Golden Soul restaurant. He watched Maya through the window. The same woman who once stood in front of him with nothing but courage. The same woman who had no idea that one decision would change everything. For the first time in his life, Ethan understood something clearly. Power was not about making sure nobody could challenge you. Power was having the courage to change when someone finally did. But somewhere in the city, the people who feared Ethan's transformation were getting ready. And this time, they were not coming for the mafia boss. They were coming for the man he had become. Everyone thought Ethan Park's final choice would cost him his power. But they were about to learn that the man who chose respect over fear had already won the battle that mattered most. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe people can change when they find the courage to do what is right, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Ethan Park and Maya Carter. The moment Ethan chose a different path, he knew there would be consequences. Power always came with enemies. But changing the way he used that power created something even more dangerous. People who wanted the old Ethan Park back. The people around him believed they knew the man they followed. They knew the leader who never hesitated. The leader who never apologized. The leader who solved every problem through fear. But that man was disappearing, and they were afraid. One evening, Ethan faced the people who had questioned his decisions. The room was silent. Everyone waited for him to return to the person they knew. But Ethan did not. I spent years believing fear was strength. Nobody moved. I believed making people afraid meant they respected me. He looked around the room. But I was wrong. The words carried through the room. Because Ethan Park was admitting something nobody expected. The man who built an empire through control was admitting that control was not enough. Fear creates obedience. A pause. But respect creates loyalty. For the first time, nobody had an answer. Because Ethan was not speaking like a man who lost power. He was speaking like a man who finally understood it. Later that night, Ethan returned to the Golden Soul restaurant. The place where everything began. The place where Maya first challenged him. She looked at him and smiled slightly. You look different. Ethan nodded. I feel different. Maya waited. I used to think strength meant nobody could hurt me. He looked around the restaurant. But now I think strength means having something worth protecting. Those words represented everything that had changed. Maya never gave Ethan power. He already had that. She gave him something more difficult. Perspective. She reminded him that behind every decision were real people. Real lives. Real consequences. Years later, people would still tell the story of Ethan Park and Maya Carter. They would remember the Korean Mafia boss who entered a restaurant believing his name made him untouchable. They would remember the Black Waitress who stood in front of him without knowing his power. They would remember the moment she chose courage over fear. But the most important part of the story was not the slap. It was what happened after. Because one action forced a powerful man to ask himself a question he avoided for years. What kind of person have I become? And that question changed everything. Ethan Park never stopped being powerful. He never stopped being respected. But he finally understood the difference between being feared and being valued. Fear could make people obey. Money could make people stay. Power could make people listen. But only character could make people truly respect you. Maya Carter never wanted to change the world. She simply refused to ignore what was wrong. And somehow, that was enough to change the most powerful man in the city. Because sometimes the person with the least power is the person brave enough to remind everyone what true strength looks like.